Hurricane Helene, Hurricane Milton, and the Wyoming wildfire. Follow me down the rabbit hole about current events. Hello, friends, and welcome back to the rabbit hole. I'm your host, Danny, and today we're talking about current events, and I have my voice back. Last week I had to put out, I didn't have to. I put out a really good interview that I had with Dr. Jeremy and John. What a phenomenal conversation we had, but I now have my voice back and I can actually record this current events episode you all have been asking me for. I don't know how many of you have messaged me about these hurricanes. Not very many people have talked to me about the wildfire, but that needed to be included as well. So here we go. Before we get started, remember that if you guys want gold, silver, precious metals, I have a really cool partnership with Wise Wolf Gold. So go to rabbithole.gold. They have subscription options as low as $50 a month, which is cheaper than anywhere else. So start getting your gold for really cheap because it's kind of expensive. And not all of us have like millions of dollars to put into gold. So anyway, let's get started. Hurricane Helene. Monday, September 23rd, the National Hurricane Center in Miami warned that a broad area of pressure over the northwestern Caribbean Sea had a high chance of tropical development. So that's when tropical storm warnings went out for Cuba and Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, because like western Cuba, because this tropical storm was headed basically right for them. It is also noted that they didn't know the motion of the weather system. They didn't know where it was going to go or what it was going to do, even though NOAA, which we'll get into NOAA in a while, but they do a lot of research into this stuff, so you think that they would know. Anyway, September 24th, the weather system was officially classified as a tropical storm, and the actual track of the storm became clearer. So they projected the path to be accelerating toward the northeastern Gulf Coast through Thursday. And this storm had caused heavy rain, flooding, and mudslides across western Cuba all night long between Monday and Tuesday night. Governor DeSantis, seeing all this, wanted to prepare Florida for the impact. So there were already emergency orders in place. So he just expanded those emergency orders to cover 61 of the 67 counties in the state. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp followed suit and expanded the emergency warning in Georgia to all 159 counties in the state. So they were getting prepared for it. By Wednesday, the 25th, Helene was upgraded to a Category 1 hurricane. And being Category 1 means that the winds are about 74 to 95 miles per hour. So before this, it's a tropical storm. And tropical storms have winds of like 39 miles per hour up to this 73 miles per hour. Because at 74, that's when it becomes a Category 1 hurricane. Florida, like I said, is used to getting hurricanes, and in fact, since 1851, they have been hit with 42 Category 3 or higher hurricanes. So that does not account for the Category 2s, the Category 1s, or tropical storms that they have been hit with. And it is like the middle of hurricane season right now. So they typically get hit with the most amount of hurricanes in September, early October timeframe. Either way, Florida is more prepared to deal with it. But just because they're more prepared doesn't mean that it isn't devastating for Florida to be hit by a hurricane. I'm just saying that they kind of know how to deal with it when it does happen. It's like when it snows in Florida, they're like, oh my God, what is happening? Because they're not used to snow, but snow here in Colorado, they're like, oh yeah, it's just another snowstorm. I mean, we still have to like shut things down sometimes or close roads or whatever because of the snow, but we are prepared for that. In Florida, they're prepared for hurricanes. They know what to do when they come. Doesn't take away the devastation. So please don't hear me say that. The hurricane had dumped a significant amount of rain over the Mexican province of Quintana Roo, flooding hotels in Cozumel and Cancun. After hitting the Yucatan coast, Helene turned north. the National Hurricane Center warned that it was growing in intensity and size. Hurricane warnings were going out in Florida's Big Bend, which is like right where the coast turns to go south. So it's headed east and west, and then it goes north and south. And flash and urban flooding alerts were going out for much of the southeastern U.S., as far as southern Appalachians and Tennessee Valley. So everyone was getting ready for a lot of rain. And just because like the eye of the storm took a path, that doesn't mean like the devastation was huge. It wasn't just in the direct path of the storm because, I mean, Chimney Rock, which we're going to talk about, wasn't in the direct path of the storm, but it was completely taken out. Thursday, September 26th, the hurricane was reclassified as a Category 4. This was due to the warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico, and that was kind of like helping the hurricane get more intense and grow. So the winds for Category 4 are between 130 and 154 miles per hour. Like, I don't think people can even imagine that. It's so intense. 130 miles per hour. That's crazy. That night, Helene made landfall at Keaton Beach, which is just where the eye of the storm hit. It hit all of Florida's coast, but like that was where the eye of the storm actually made landfall. This was just south of the Big Bend at about 11:10 p.m. Maybe it's still considered part of the Big Bend of Florida. I don't know. I'm not a Floridian. I've been to Florida only a few times. Friday, the Gulf Coast awoke to just complete devastation and destruction. Entire communities swept away by the storm. First responders were working on water rescues in Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Large areas of the Atlanta metro area were flooded. I mean, it was bad. It was a Category 4, so it was going to do some serious damage, and it did. Luckily, Florida has this really cool program in place. Through the National Guard, they have a special missions unit, which their entire job is to go to these disasters, which Florida obviously has a lot of them. Not a lot, I mean, a relative amount. I mean, I've never been in a hurricane, right? So a lot of hurricanes for what we would see, and they help take care of what needs to be taken care of right after a hurricane. I think Georgia is starting to implement something like this where they're like, yep, we need somebody. It's basically like a special forces, but for the National Guard to put in just a small team that can go in and do some really important things. So we know that the hurricane made landfall, the Big Bend of Florida, then headed mostly north through Fitzgerald. It kind of went like a little bit east, but mostly north through Fitzgerald, Georgia, and then just east of Athens. And then at about Carnesville, I'm saying that wrong, Carnesville, Georgia, the storm turned more western and downgraded to a tropical storm, then went straight through Andrews, North Carolina, which I know is kind of far from Chimney Rock and from Asheville. But remember that this is just where the eye of the storm, like the path was taken. There's a lot of storm around the eye. It's like, that's not where the storm is only there. No, it's huge. So it reaches out really far. Then apparently the storm kind of finished up just north of the Tennessee border in Kentucky. Obviously, we saw devastation from the hurricane in Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, but the question is why it was so bad in Asheville and surrounding areas. I think a lot of people are like, wait a second, like, I mean, I didn't really understand. I've never been to Asheville, so I was like, why did Asheville get hit so hard and the surrounding areas? Well, Asheville, which is the biggest city in the area, so I'm kind of like defaulting to that one, is in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The elevation of Chimney Rock, which is gone now, by the way, is 2,579 feet above sea level. Now, to me, I'm like, well, that's not that high. I live at almost 7,000 feet right here where I'm talking to you from. But sea level for them is only about 400 miles away. Sea level for me is 3 times that. So, I mean, that's quite the climb in only 400 miles. So they get to these like mountainous towns where they're like in the Appalachian Mountains. This area hasn't had a catastrophic flood event since 1916. So over 100 years, they have not had a flood or seen a flood of this. I mean, I don't think they've ever seen a flood of this magnitude. A lot of the roads through the mountains follow the rivers, as with any mountains, right? So they're going to follow the rivers along wherever they're going. The river overflowed by a lot, not by like just a little bit. It was completely overflowing. So the waterways couldn't handle the amount of rain that was falling. And I mean, they saw so much rain for so long. In one instance, a 6-inch waterway turned into a 60-meter waterway. So if your house or a road was built near that waterway, it was completely taken out by this flooding. And I mean, miles and miles and miles of roads were completely taken out. I mean, full houses. I watched videos of full houses like floating away. Your entire house goes floating. And it comes on so fast that you aren't prepared. If my toddler's a foot away from me, I wouldn't have time to grab him. Like, he would be taken away by the water. And honestly, a full-grown adult would be taken away by the water as well. Chimney Rock specifically was situated in a valley, so that helped to funnel more rainfall through the town and the Broad River, which made its way right through the town. So the Broad River is now overflowing. Now you're in a valley, so there's more water coming down. So things are just getting washed away. That entire town is just gone. It's awful. It's terrifying. And the ground had reached its saturation limit, so this caused a lot of mudslides. And mudslides are really scary because literally the ground beneath your feet is flowing away. So it's not like a flood that's coming. You see the water and it kind of moves on. Like everything and that's why houses were floating away, is because the ground in which these houses are built upon is now leaving. And these things came in so fast, like I said, people didn't even have a chance to prepare for them. And on top of that, the people were being told to be worried about the dams breaking. And the towns near those dams were worried about that. And they were starting to evacuate because they're like, oh my gosh, the dams are going to break. Well, those dams held. And it was towns that were not evacuating, which thought they wouldn't be affected by the waters. They were affected really heavily, which were towns like far away from the dams. So basically media was telling them, oh, worry about this, when in fact, it was something completely different that they needed to be worried about. And other places that needed to be worried that weren't worried at all. They were like, oh, we're going to be fine over here. Nope. Either way, cities were completely devastated. But I know that that's not why you're here. I know that we have all seen that the cities are devastated, and we have seen how horrific this is, and the lack of government support, and the lack of, like, how awful this has been for those people. I get that. I know that that's what you guys have all seen on the news. And then you've come here and you're like, but why did this happen? So let's talk about the conspiracies, because honestly, I want to know why it happened as well.
It's back to school season, football season, and life gets stressful again season. Which begs the question, isn't it time you had an edible to relax? IndaCloud has finally done it. They've captured the flavors of childhood in their Soda Shop series Delta 9 Gummy. Get those strawberry, grape, and fruit punch flavors while you also get high as... IndaCloud has all your favorite dispensary-grade cannabis products shipped right to your door discreetly across all 50 states. Between their Beast Mode vapes, their exotic flower choices, specialty-flavored wraps, and their pre-rolls and concentrates, IndaCloud are the experts at getting your cannabis to you and getting you very, very high. And you can find it all at indacloud.co. Head to indacloud.co/fall24 and get discreet delivery on top-shelf THC products for 30% off on your first order. That's indaclow.co/fall24 to snag 30% off your first order.
Let's start with NOAA. So the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration is a scientific-based organization that is funded by the U.S. Department of Commerce. So the Office of Marine and Aviation Operations is the branch that has the hurricane hunters. So they have 2 P-3 Orions that they fly into hurricanes to study them. Several people that I served with in the Navy went to NOAA after getting out because they were already familiar with the platform. I mean, specifically, like, flight engineers, so they already knew like how to fly on P3s and what to do because that's what we were doing in the Navy. So they were like, cool, let's go fly for NOAA. NOAA pays well, whatever. So what's really cool about the P3 is how dynamic it can be. For example, the aircraft that I flew on was a modified P3. And obviously in the Navy, the plane is a submarine hunter, but for NOAA, they fly into hurricanes. So those are two completely different missions. Well, on Tuesday, the 24th, when the storm was just a storm in between Cuba and Mexico, a P3, NOAA 42 was the little tag, took off from Lakeland, Florida, which is where these P3s are based out of. And they flew for about 7.5 hours and was flying between Cuba and Mexico, right where the storm was. Then, on Wednesday, as the storm is hitting Mexico, again, a P3 NOAA 42 took off from Lakeland, Florida, flew where the storm was hitting in Mexico, then went to land in Houston. So I'm assuming that they landed in Houston because the storm was headed for Florida the next day and they wanted to make sure that they could take off the next day, which they needed to do. So on Thursday, that same P3, NOAA 42, takes off from Houston, flies over to the eye of the hurricane, and spends most of its flight circling the eye of the hurricane. So they're hardly moving at all. They're literally just doing circles, right, in the eye of the hurricane, and then they go and return to Houston. Isn't it interesting that that's the day that the hurricane went from a Category 1 to a Category 4? Right around this time, while they're flying in the eye of the hurricane, it grows in intensity. Then, of course, that night, like almost midnight, 11 p.m., the hurricane makes landfall. The next day on Friday, they're like, oh, well, the hurricane's moved on, so they go home, just land in Lakeland, Florida, and that's it. But as NOAA is following the storm, it picks up speed more and more. Like, that's interesting. Like, the first day, it was just turning into a tropical storm. The next day, Category 1. The next day, Category 4. Then they just leave it alone and it starts to die down. Well, I know the P3s in the Navy launch buoys from, like, for submarine hunting. Actually, there are no more P3s in the Navy. They're all been replaced now. But when there were, they had these little chutes that they could launch things from. So what's stopping these NOAA P3s from being able to cloud seed and put things into the atmosphere and create a more intense hurricane? Now, I know what you're thinking because my husband said the exact same thing. Danny, it's literally their job to fly into storms like this. Like, of course, they're going to fly into the eye of a hurricane because their job is to study hurricanes. So this isn't a smoking gun. This is their job. But of course, like, they're doing their job, right? Like, that's the narrative they're going to tell you. They're never going to say, oh, NOAA's cloud seeding. No, NOAA has a cover story. We study hurricanes. And I'm sure they actually do study hurricanes as well as cloud seed. Right? Why can't it be both? Why can't they be doing something nefarious and also studying hurricanes? Because, like in Antarctica, where they're actually doing scientific research down there, like the scientists that are down there are doing scientific research. And they're also keeping the public away from finding out that that Antarctica is actually the wall around the world and there's a firmament down there. And also aliens, right? Like, why can't it be both things? And it can be. I could name 10 things right now that the government has told us that was true that isn't and has been proven that it's not true. Or that they're like, hey, like with Antarctica, we're doing scientific research and also this other thing. Anyway, we've got the cloud seeding. So now let's talk about the lithium mines. Lithium is an element and is used for a number of things, right? I was like, what is lithium even for? So they use it as a medicine. So if you just like Google lithium, they're like, oh, it's a mood stabilizer. It's medicine. They do put it in your water as well, so be careful about that. Anyway, but it's also used in batteries, rechargeable batteries for electric vehicles, laptops, phones, and other portable electronics. I feel like a flight attendant. Lithium is used to produce heat-resistant ceramics and glass. It's used as a lubricant for industries such as aerospace, automotive, and construction. It's used as a fusion cell in staged thermonuclear weapons, and it's isotopes are used in nuclear reactors and neutron absorbers. So super important for nuclear things. Lithium-based refrigerants are used in air conditioning and refrigerant systems due to their low toxicity and environmental impact. So lithium is really important. I would say probably the most important thing that lithium used for is the batteries in electric vehicles. And we'll get to why in just a little while. But they really need lithium for electric vehicles. And you know where the largest lithium mines are? Well, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, which is funded by the U.S. Department of the Interior, quote, in the United States, lithium was first mined from pegmatite ore bodies, wow, that was hard to say, in South Dakota in the late 1800s. The Kings Mountain pegmatite belt of North Carolina also had significant production from pegmatites, and the area may still contain as much as 750 million metric tons of ore containing 5 metric ton lithium metal. In 2018, U.S. production of lithium was restricted to a single lithium brine mining operation in Nevada. That is not what they just said. They said that it's in the King Mountains, that's where you want to mine it from, but they can't. They can only mine it in Nevada as of 2018. In 2018, the U.S. had a net import reliance as a percentage of apparent consumption of more than 50% for lithium. The U.S. is not a significant producer of lithium, so the commodity is mainly imported from Chile and Argentina to meet consumer demand, end quote. So that's coming from the U.S. Geological Survey. And North Carolina has been saying, like, nope, we're not opening mines, we're not doing that. Finally, this year they were like, okay, yeah, that's fine, let's open some mines. I mean, and there are rumors that the state will be declaring eminent domain on the areas that were affected where they could build a lithium mine. And I actually reached out to an eminent domain law firm in North Carolina to find out what the validity of these reports is. They never answered my questions, nor have they called me back. Basically, I think everyone's like, yeah, we don't want to be involved. So I don't know if it's 100% true or not. I couldn't find actual hardcore evidence that eminent domain will be declared. However, they have ways of skirting around that law. When we get to FEMA, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But Piedmont Lithium was already working on getting a mine set up in the area. So this has been in work since the beginning of the year, as well as Albemarle. But let's focus on Piedmont Lithium. I might be saying that wrong. Who knows? Carolina Lithium, which is a proposal that Piedmont Lithium is proposing, is a proposed multi-phase fully integrated lithium project in Gaston County, North Carolina, with mining spodumene concentrate production. The lithium hydroxide conversion being designed as phase 1, and the second lithium hydroxide train being designed as phase 2. We expect Carolina Lithium to be one of the world's only fully integrated lithium sites and among the most sustainable lithium hydroxide operations of its kind. The project, currently in the development stage, is located within the renowned Carolina 10 spodumene belt. I'm saying that so wrong. These scientific words are really hard for me, so please just forgive me. Anyway, so they actually got permits for mining construction in May of 2024. So I think it's important to know that Piedmont Lithium's top 3 shareholders are BlackRock, no surprise there, LG Chem, a Chinese company, and Vanguard. Again, no surprise at all. But like I said, Albemarle, who is a lithium giant, has plans to reopen a mine in North Carolina as well. So their plans were to reopen the mine sooner rather than later, but then they delayed it. So their top 3 shareholders for Albemarle, they're Vanguard, BlackRock, and Capital Research Global Investors. Their mine was supposed to open in May of 2024, just like Piedmont, and then and they actually received a $90 million grant, from the Biden-Harris Defense Department. Isn't that interesting? And then they delayed their reopen. They're like, yeah, we're not going to open in May. We're just going to wait for a little while. Why is that? maybe they knew something that we didn't. Because once the mine is up and running, it's estimated to make $250 billion a year. Which makes me wonder why the Biden-Harris administration gave them a grant of $90 million when they easily could have given them a loan and then been paid back within a year, because this mine can make $250 billion a year. That's ridiculous. For reference, Kings Mountain, which is where the mine is located, could produce enough material to manufacture 1.2 million electric vehicles annually. 1.2 million. While they're making $250 billion a year. Do you guys know who Douglas Emhoff is? If you don't, let me tell you. He is the second gentleman of the country. And he submitted the permits for these mines. Yep, Kamala Harris's husband. And her signature actually needed to be on the permits for them to be approved. Why would he do that, you ask? Because he is a huge shareholder in both BlackRock and Vanguard. And that is actually how him and Kamala have amassed most of their fortune, is through BlackRock. Convenient. Convenient that they got a grant from the Biden-Harris administration. It's like he has an in or something. That's very, very strange. But actually, the Harris involvement might be even deeper than just financial gain. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's for sure financial gain, but North Carolina is a swing state for the election. So the areas that were heavily affected by the hurricane are currently very right-leaning. So according to the House, Senate, and congressional maps, those areas are hard red right now. And they have been getting more Republicans since the early 2000s. There were a couple of years in there that Democrats won the area, but since 2011, the Republicans have been winning hardcore. So in 2008, North Carolina was a blue state for the election, the presidential election, for the Obama-McCain election. In 2012, it was close, but Obama won over, they went red. So Romney won over Obama in that election for the state of North Carolina. In 2012, they voted red for Trump-Clinton. And in 2020, they voted Trump again, but just barely. I mean, all of these elections have been super close. So it's not like red is overwhelmingly winning. It just happens to be that they finish red at the end of the election. But if you take a bunch of people that vote Republican and make it to where they can't get to the polls, all the while pumping in illegal immigrants that are now allowed to vote, and you know that they're going to vote Democrat, the state will now swing blue. Because it's a swing state. You don't know which way it's going to go. And they need every swing state they can get. And I think the thing that really put the nail in the coffin here was how slow of a response to this disaster that they've had. So much so that civilians are flying their own personal helicopters to help rescue people. It's so bad out there that when these civilians are getting to people in need of rescue, the people are like, no, I'll just wait here because I'm sure the government's coming and they're going to turn the electricity back on. Everything's going to be fine in just like a week or so. And they have to break the news to these people that, first of all, nobody's coming. The roads are washed out for miles in every direction, and the power and roads won't be accessible or won't be restored for months. This is so bad that people, if they're stranded, they need to leave because they're not going to be, they can't get to them unless they have helicopters. Rescuers can't get to the people that are stranded without helicopters. And FEMA, who is supposed to be helping because isn't that their whole freaking job, has now allotted everyone only $750. Which in and of itself is disgusting because they are giving every illegal $9,000. $9,000 per illegal that enters our country, but you've now only allotted $750 to the people of a natural disaster. They have spent $45.733 billion overseas just this year. $45 billion of our taxpayer dollars. And they're only giving our people that need something $750. That's it. But you can send $40 billion overseas to help whoever knows. Oh my gosh. Excuse me while I get so freaking worked up about this. Because on top of all of that, how are they even supposed to receive the money, right? So you're going to give them $750, and then they need access to go online to be able to receive the money. They need access to their banks. They need access to the internet. They don't have access to power. And then, okay, say that they do get their $750 that you're allotting them. What are they supposed to do? Go down to the local grocery store and buy groceries for their family? You mean the grocery store that's washed away, that's completely gone? What are they supposed to do? Pay somebody to drive them out of this, like, forsaken area now? Oh, okay. That money means nothing to these people right now. Don't get me wrong, it will mean something when they need to start rebuilding their lives because they've lost everything, to include loved ones. But that money means nothing. And on top of that, there have been several reports that this $750 is not a grant, but a loan. And that if they don't pay back the $750 eventually, then their houses will be confiscated. So forget eminent domain. Now they're just going to take them by way of basically like foreclosure. I don't know, like a lien against their house for $750 that won't even help them. It makes me wonder why we're even paying taxes in this country to fund foreign wars. That's why, because that's what we're doing. And just so you know, in September, FEMA spent $4 billion on COVID. Last month, in September, $4 billion on COVID. Hasn't COVID been over for like years now? A couple years? It's 2024. COVID hasn't been rampant in this country, killing people since like 21, 22. Why are you spend $4 billion last month? Why? These people have just been through one of the worst tragedies of their entire life, and this is what they're going through. This is how our government is treating them. And they're like honestly believing that the government's going to come and help them, and they're not. And then you have these Black Hawk helicopters. You have all these volunteers, all these people, all these civilians that have come together, and they're like, we need to support our communities. So they're getting all these supplies. People are going out and they're handing out supplies. They're doing what they can to help the people that need help. And then Black Hawk helicopters come over and deliberately ruin volunteer supply depots with rotor washes. Like, the government doesn't not want to help. They want to ruin the civilians that are trying to help. They want this place to be in devastation for as long as humanly possible. That way they can come in and make a fucking buck. Excuse me while I get pissed off. I'm sorry. I got so freaking worked up because this is ridiculous. Everything about what's happening in North Carolina right now is ridiculous. If you want to know more about kind of like what's happening and what people are doing, civilians are doing, the Sean Ryan Show put out a great like 1 hour episode on it. There's a little bit of misinformation in that episode. He talks about, or the people, his guests talk about how Kamala made the National Guard load up a C-17 with supplies just so she could take a picture with it. But then those supplies never made it. And I heard that and I got even more worked up because I was like, of fucking course they would, right? Well, Sean did make a statement that information was false and that C-17 that they loaded actually just broke down, so they couldn't fly it that day. So they moved everything to another plane and they took the supplies out the next day. So luckily those supplies did get somewhere. I don't know if they're actually helping people, but they have been removed from the National Guard base. But I'll link that episode, the Sean Ryan Show, in the show notes if you are interested in listening to that. By the way, I'm not sponsored by the Sean Ryan Show. I just actually really like the podcast and I listen to it often. So I think there's some relevant information that his guests go over that I like to bring to you guys. Wow. This whole episode is going to get me really pissed off because now we get to talk about Hurricane Milton. About 2 weeks after Helene made landfall in Florida, along came Hurricane Milton. So it was estimated to be a Category 5, but luckily it made landfall as a Category 3. But this hurricane was super weird because of where it originated from. Milton started in the western Gulf of Mexico and headed straight toward Florida, and it picked up intensity quickly. But most of the time, from what I'm understanding about hurricanes, they don't typically originate in the Gulf of Mexico, and also they don't typically pick up speed as they head towards land. So everything about this hurricane was super weird. And just like with Helene, with Milton, we see NOAA 42 flying right into the storm. On Monday, October 7th, the P3 left Lakeland and flew for almost 7 hours. They didn't fly right to the center of the storm. They kind of like flew all around the storm The storm was actually a little bit further north than where they were flying. They were kind of flying right off the Yucatan Peninsula, while the storm, like I said, was further north. On Tuesday, October 8th, they left Lakeland again, flew near the storm, and then that night they landed in Mobile, Alabama. On Wednesday, Milton made landfall, and NOAA was flying off the west coast of Florida. So something that is different about NOAA's flights this time around is that they weren't flying and doing circles right in the eye of the storm as they did with Helene. They're just flying like near the storm more. So I'm wondering if that's because the tornadoes that were coming off the hurricane, or if like they weren't manipulating the weather as much with this one, or maybe they were manipulating the weather more with this one. I don't know. Either way, it's just different and weird. But just because NOAA wasn't flying right the center of the storm doesn't mean someone else didn't create the storm. We'll go over storm creation in just a minute, but the question I'm going to answer for you now is, why would they create the storm, right? Like, what is the purpose? Well, one of the reasons is the same as for Helene, is election manipulation. So Florida is obviously a very red state. We all know that. And in fact, a lot of people moved there during and after COVID because of the laws around this pandemic and how that state dealt with things. But again, if people can't get to the polls, or they can't send off their ballots, they can't fill them out, they can't hand them in, then they're not going to be able to vote. And with illegals being pumped into the country, anyway, we've already been through this, right? Along with that, there are rumors that Tampa Bay wants to become a 15-minute city. I mean, not just rumors. Actually, they have plans. They've planned it through Tampa Moves to make the city more commutable. So the idea is that through public transportation, walking, bicycling, basically not using cars, then you will be able to get through the city in 15 minutes. They even have plans to do a $3 billion downtown renovation. So the Tampa Bay Lightning owner and Bill Gates are kind of in on this one together. And anytime we see Bill Gates involved, you know it's bad. So maybe that's why they want to flood the city and destroy it, because then they can do these renovations better or easier. I mean, they already have 70 sensors around the city to show that they can turn Tampa into a smart city. But they have plans to put in like a lot more sensors, especially in places where you see high crime rates. But we also need to keep an eye on Orlando, because they have plans to turn Orlando into a future city is what they're calling it. So I'm wondering if a hurricane's going to hit them next. So keep your eye out, Orlando. If you're there, pay attention. Because you know who else had 15-minute future city plans? Asheville and Maui. If you didn't think it was all connected, you're lying to yourself, because Maui is still, Lahaina is still just like destroyed, and Asheville is now destroyed. And now you got Tampa Bay that's flooded and destroyed. And who knows? Who knows what's going to happen next? But I think the question that most people get, they're like, okay, fine, they're controlling the weather, but like how? Well, a hurricane and tornado control device, because a patent was filed for this device in 2001 and made public in 2003. This device, as per the abstract, this device could affect the formation and or direction of a low atmospheric weather system. Audio generators are positioned to project sound waves toward a peripheral area of a weather system. The sound waves are generated at a frequency to affect the formation of the weather system in a manner to disrupt, enhance, or direct the formation. The sound waves can also be projected in a manner to cause the system to produce rain. To control the direction, they would have to point these sound devices in specific directions, and the hurricane or tornado would move with the sound waves. So you'd have to have these sound wave devices along the path in which you want the hurricane to go. And then you would see the hurricane change directions in those areas and go in a specific direction to direct / intensify / disrupt the hurricane or tornado. This patent goes on to say, in the USA, the U.S. Weather Research Program and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, if you weren't paying attention earlier, have invested millions of dollars in research to find the system which will predict the accuracy with accuracy the formation and path of potentially violent weather systems. Of the two, meaning tornadoes and hurricanes, hurricanes are more predictable as to formation and direction. We saw Noah flying in and around both hurricanes, so isn't that interesting? Ongoing research is also being done to cause weather systems to produce rain where needed. This capability would be of obvious advantage in the farming industry. So this patent just it spews out a lot more information. I just picked certain things to kind of explain what they were trying to explain in their patent. In their patent, they actually talk about 5 other patents that have already been in place. So these 5 patents, one of them discloses methods of disruption of tornado formations, which involve cloud seeding. Another one discloses the use of sound waves to control water droplet content in clouds. Another shows methods of cloud seeding for the production of rain. The 4th one shows the method of dispersing fog by employing microwaves. And the last one is methods that are concerned with employing shock waves to prevent hail. So there are actually a lot more. I mean, this is just since 2003. A lot more patents about weather manipulation, weather disturbances. Very interesting. And obviously we know about HAARP. If you guys saw the auroras recently, you got to know that HAARP is playing a role in that too. But you know what? The government's just going to keep blaming it on climate control. In fact, the technical director for CNN, Charlie Chester, has been caught on camera stating that climate control will be the next staged pandemic. Basically, that one can go on for a long time, and so they can just kind of like ride it out for like a decent amount of time. Whereas like COVID only lasted maybe 2 years. Well, this climate control pandemic can last a lot longer. So hold on to your hats for that. That'll be fun. Lastly, let's talk about the fires in Wyoming. On September 27th, while the world was watching what Helene was going to do, lightning struck in Bighorn National Forest and has been burning ever since. More than 900 personnel are working to contain the Elk Fire. That's the name of the fire, Elk Fire. Multiple hotshot crews, engines, heavy equipment have been deployed to the area to try to help contain it. It's important to know that climate change is also affecting this area. Imagine that. So I'm about 7 hours south of this fire, and typically throughout this area, we've had at least one freeze by mid-October. I mean, and it's starting to really cool down by mid-October. But so far, we haven't had many days that are lower than 60 degrees. I think we had one day that the high was like 54, but that's really weird. It's weird that it's still 60 and 70 degrees mid to late October. And we're seeing fire bans throughout this entire area from here all the way up there because of how dry it is. So this fire, which started by lightning, is about 90,475 acres right now. And as of October 14th, only 26% of this fire is contained. So what are the conspiracies here? I know you're like, okay, cool, there's a fire. Why do we care? Well, isn't it interesting that Rare Element Resources has a project going on, Bear Lodge Project, in northeastern Wyoming? So this project would maximize the recovery of key magnetic materials of neodymium, praseodymium, wow, these are hard, terbium, and dysprosium. Sounds like I'm talking Russian. Anyway, these materials can be mined in national forests, so I looked it up. But getting the permits and getting past the EPA is like a nightmare of red tape. The demand on these minerals is expected to grow exponentially over the next 10 years due to their use in defense and green technologies. The same green technologies that need lithium, you ask? Yep. Those exact same green technologies. These minerals are super important for electric vehicles, solar panels, and wind turbines. So no, these things are not a coincidence. All of these things are connected. They are using natural disasters to do whatever they want. It's interesting that they are controlling the weather. And then The amount of things that are coming out, like the amount of mainstream media that are like, oh, well, these conspiracy theories are muddying up what's really happening. No, the conspiracy theorists, these conspiracy theories are telling you what's actually happening because they don't want you to know. They thought that we'd be none the wiser, that we wouldn't figure it out. But you know what? Conspiracy theorists have become more now than ever before because of COVID, because people are waking up and seeing that they are manipulating us. Anyway, I'm sorry I have gotten so worked up in this episode. I haven't done that in a while, actually. But I think it's really important to know that people are losing everything in their lives right now. They're losing people. They're losing houses. They're losing all their stuff, which you're like, okay, it's just stuff. Like, they'll get it back. But no, sometimes things are so important. Like, my parents' house burned down a couple years ago. It's been almost 10 years now. But it was devastating for our family. All of our childhood memories, all the things, like, you don't think about, but they have sentimental value. We were fortunate that no lives were lost. Our dogs never came back. So they were scared off by the fire. They never came back. But, like, no lives were lost. But the people that have been affected by these fires, by the hurricanes, they're losing everything that they have. They're losing loved ones. Like, it's horrific, the things that they're going through. So if you pray, please pray about the devastation that these people are experiencing, and pray for somebody to step in and do something, because this is awful. If you can donate, I think it's really important that we donate. The Red Cross, I don't know if the money is even going to these victims. So just make sure you're really smart with if you're donating like food or money or whatever. They don't need money right now. Right now, what they need is like a warm place to lay. Another thing that I didn't even mention earlier is that FEMA is taking up every single hotel in the area. So people can't even stay in hotels because FEMA employees, or FEMA has rented out all these hotels, but there are no FEMA people actually sleeping in these hotels. So if you're curious about what FEMA is doing, nothing. I don't know. Maybe they're doing something. It just feels like they could be doing a lot more. It feels like the government response could be a lot stronger, and it feels like they didn't have to sabotage every civilian that has come in the area to help, because they will not do it. Don't you care about your people at all? Or do you just care about sending our money other places? Do you just care about making money and putting money in your own pockets? Anyway, until next week, my friends. One last thing. I will be moving. I'm in the middle of trying to pack my life and move it. And with 2 small children and two podcasts, it's a lot of work. So for the next couple of weeks, you'll be hearing some interviews that I've had with people. I have put those all together. That way you guys still get episodes every single week until I am back to do research once the move is complete. So until then, my friends, you'll still hear my voice, but stay skeptical, and I will see you all then. Hey friends, The Rabbit Hole is an independent podcast with everything you hear done by me, Danny Mercy. I appreciate all of your support. Please rate and review wherever you're listening. If you want to follow us on Instagram, it's at rabbit.holepodcast. And thank you, Zakar Valaha, for our awesome intro.